And everyone can be seated. Stay.
Thank you. Julie Schenecker's psychotic, and you can know that because she wrote in her journal to Parker, her husband, that directions, how to donate the clothes and what to do about services. That's part of the argument you just heard. That, counsel suggests to you, is psychotic thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, what at first blush appears to be unreasonable or illogical, upon further inspection and analysis, is reasonable and not psychotic. And let's not throw the word psychotic around here as if we're bending our elbows in a bar just shooting the breeze. Psychotic thinking and delusions has a very, very fixed and definite definition in psychiatry. And you heard it repeatedly. A false and fixed belief, not based on reality. Defense counsel suggests to you that Parker, it would have been illogical, unreasonable, a delusion, psychotic, for the defendant to think that her husband, after she murdered the kids, would take care of donating the clothes and doing arrangements. In fact, what is everything you've heard about Parker Schenecker demonstrated to you? That for 20 years of their marriage, he has done nothing but pick up the pieces and take care of that woman. And she was reasonable to expect it despite the worst act that she could ever do to him. That was reasonable. That's not psychotic. And why do I emphasize that at the beginning? Because you have to look at the evidence at the time of offense to determine her state of mind. History is nice to understand her history, but it doesn't substitute for evidence of psychosis at the time of offense. And remember, that's what Dr. Taylor, Dr. Stein, and Dr. Otto told you. There was no evidence, and you didn't hear it for the last 2 hours. You heard not one example of evidence of psychotic thinking at the time of this event. Not one. And very, very shrewdly, I may ask, or tell you, the defense suggests to you that you listen to her statement and consider it in with the journal and everything. Well, I agree on the face of that argument. You must consider all the evidence. But what the suggestion implies is that the state of mind at the time of the interview, after she has been drinking and taking hydrocodone, and after she has taken a toxic amount of lithium, is the exact same state of mind she had at the time of the offense. And we know that's not true, because none of that was in her body at the time of the offense. And you know what you heard? You heard from every expert here that what you saw on that perp walk when she's being led out of that TPD station was caused by lithium toxicity and or tardive dyskinesia and or psychic shock from what happened. Not one expert told you that that was representative of her time of the offense. Let's go ahead and play that perp walk. You can see the tremorous hands, the facial gestures, uncontrolled by her. Had she committed a crime 5 minutes before a TPD, this would be an accurate reflection of her physical and mental condition. It has nothing to do with how she appeared or what she was thinking at the time of the offense. All the doctors told you that. Don't be caught up in the suggestion cleverly stated.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Can we approach?
Yes.
was not demonstrative of her state of mind or her physical actions at the time of the offense. How do you know that? How do you know that? Because there's no way that she could have had those physical tremors while driving a car and be able to fire 2 out of 3 shots and hit the target, or to sneak up on Kalix and do the same. You know that. She has always stated to the police and to everybody else she didn't start drinking, didn't start the lithium, didn't start anything until after the offense. The very first sentence you'll hear from the judge is, the issue in this case is whether Julie Schenecker was insane when the crime allegedly committed. That's the focus. You can consider as evidence of mental illness her whole history at the time it was committed. And the highlighted area I put down here before you is the question you must answer is not whether the defendant is insane today or has ever been insane, but whether instead the defendant was insane at the time the crime allegedly committed. That's the narrow focus of your inquiry. So when the defense suggests to you that the defendant's statement was, quote, riddled with psychotic thoughts, look to the testimony and evidence to determine whether there was evidence of psychotic thoughts, not a layperson's use of that term. Because what's going through her mind at the time of the interview is lithium, hydrocodone, whatever other drug she had on board that wasn't in her body at the time of the offense. In determining whether the defendant knew right from wrong at the time of the offense, I suggest you don't have to look any further than the document in evidence, which is a photocopy of a page in the notebook, and it's in evidence as 33L. The notebook was photographed, if you remember, because it was going to be processed, and there was going to be discoloration, and there was going to be things cut out of it. So it was photographed so you could see how it existed at the time of its seizure by police. 33L, and there's no good place to put that easel. 33L, Tuesday, 2 days before the crime. Three days after she bought the gun. Kalix was so shitty yesterday when she said, quote, wear makeup and dress up tomorrow for the mandatory meeting. She called me pathetic. For Saturday I proposed, she called me an evil soul. The evil starts Thursday. And what has the evidence shown you? That's when the evil occurred. She's in sync with me, always has been. Now, you don't have to rely upon what I submit to you and describe to you as the twisted and illogical interpretation by experts as to what she meant by evil. Remember, The defendant is a college-educated woman who had intensive 9-month training as a linguist in Russian language. What does that tell you? What can you logically infer from that? That she understands the necessity for using language correctly. She understands the meaning of language. She understands the nuance of language. But you don't have to be a linguist to understand what evil is. The concept of good and evil has been around since mankind could rationally think. Evil has always meant wrong, and good has always meant right. And there's no way to spin that otherwise. She acknowledged by that statement, in that exhibit, that she knew that killing her kids was wrong and would be viewed as such by society. And why do I even mention that by society part? Because part of the instruction is a defendant who believed that what she was doing was morally right is not insane if the defendant knew that what she was doing violated societal standards or was against the law. So if she knew, even though she believed her act to be right, if she knew that it was against the law or that other members of society would view it as against the law or wrong, then she's not insane by law in the state of Florida. That's not Krumeron law. That's the law you'll hear instructed to you at the end of the case and which you must follow. This defendant's evil acts were spawned by anger, depression, resentment, retribution, a feel of abandonment and betrayal. And on the 27th of January of 2011, this defendant had a great, long-standing, seething anger towards Parker Schenecker just underneath her surface. And how do you know that? Because the evidence has shown you that in November of 2008, before the car crash, this defendant was drinking and drinking heavily. 10 drinks a day, she reported upon admission to the rehab center. And then she gets in an accident. She rear ends a truck with some type of trailer behind it. And Parker's called away from the base to come get her at the hospital. And on the trip after that, or sometime that day, this defendant admits that she had been drinking prior to going to AA that day, or en route to going to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, what's that tell you? I suggest to you, common sense tells you, if you're drinking before you go to your Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, you got it bad. You got it bad. And what did Parker Schenecker do? Parker Schenecker saw that as the most immediate threat to this defendant's health and safety, to the health and safety of his children, and the health and safety of others on the road. And he insisted that she go to rehab right away, that she wasn't coming back into that house until she went to rehab and got clean from alcohol, because that's all he knew at that point. He didn't know about the opiate abuse at that time. And so what did that present this defendant with? It presented her with a horrible Hobson's choice. She could either have the alcohol that she craved, or she could have the family life, the comfortable family life that she had lived. And that comfortable family life was quite a cost to her when she was balancing this. Because it was a family life that she had lived and having been taken care of by Parker Schenecker for 20 years. A family life that included Audi convertibles, Mercedes-Benz, a Tampa Palms house with a pool, a maid, trips to Hawaii, gambling at the Hard Rock, drinking lunches with their girlfriends, a devoted husband who'd always been there for her through her ups and her downs. And she recognized she couldn't live alone. (33M), please. On the screen now is 33M as in Mary. It's part of the journal. And she wrote to Parker, "I'm sorry, so sorry. I don't know what to say, but I sensed divorce was inevitable. But I can't live alone." And it goes on. The defense wants you to believe that's some type of psychotic delusion. Her thought that her husband would divorce her. And somehow it was paranoid for her to believe on January 19th that letter, that email that Parker Schenecker had sent around to family, which they wouldn't share with her, was about divorce. And counsel suggests to you that that's unreasonable because Parker Schenecker had been devoted and been there for her at each step of the way for 20 years. And that's true. But what had changed? What was reasonable? What reasonably could change her concern about their marriage? Never before had her drinking been a problem like this. Never before had Parker insisted she go into rehab. Never before had he kicked her out of the house. Never before had she heard that all happened in the context of a conversation she overheard between her daughter and Parker Schenecker, where the daughter asked her, or told her, "You should divorce Mom," or "Why don't you divorce Mom?" Wasn't unreasonable, given all those circumstances and all those facts, for Julie Schenecker to think, maybe I've pushed Parker Schenecker as hard and as long as I can. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. And what did he write to Julie Schenecker in that email of December 6th? And I paraphrase, "We will go on with you or without you." He wanted her to reintegrate into the family after she got out of rehab. He wanted her to be part, but he told her, "We're going to be okay. We're going forward, the kids and I, with you or without you." "Parker, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say, but I sensed divorce was inevitable, but I can't live alone." So in her mind, she did the next best thing, given the resentment and the anger and the feeling of abandonment. She let Parker live alone. She wasn't only angry that Parker Schenecker made her face that choice between booze and family. She was angered by the circumstances surrounding the admission into the rehab facility and what happened after that. Remember, you've heard testimony, this defendant hated to be locked up. And within 4 or 5 days, and Parker's visiting daily, if not once, twice a day, she implores him to take her out of there, check her out of there. And Parker refuses to do that. And she's angry about that. Nobody understands Julie. Parker takes his kids and meets his family up in the Panhandle for Thanksgiving. He gets a call on Wednesday indicating from the doctor, you can take your wife out of here. And Parker Schenecker says, there's nobody home down there, and I'm not coming back yet. And so Julie has to sit at Thanksgiving. Sit in a place she's locked up, feels like she's locked up, and she doesn't like it. And she's angry at that. And Parker comes back and gets her in Sunday. She feels abandoned, betrayed, isolated. Nobody understands Julie. How do you know the depth of her resentment and anger? You have 33 on. Showing you 33R on the screen, which is a page from the, if we can scan a little bit further down, please. Thank you. If you look at this, you can see the depth of the anger and resentment towards Parker. I could have done this any time, even when you were here, but luckily you weren't. I might have taken you out too. And here's the kicker. That would have been a crying shame. Do you see the seething resentment dripping from that statement? The prospect of talking to her husband through this journal about murdering him, that would have been a crying shame, she writes. What does that tell you? It not only tells you about the anger and resentment she has, it tells you, ironically, that Mr. Schenecker was probably safer in the Middle East than he was in the bed next to her.
Objection and proper argument.
Sustain. Continue, Coach.
It tells you that, and this point contradicts the suggestion that she killed the kids solely to save them from some evil. Because there's nothing in this statement where she suggests, when she's talking about another violent act, committing that violent act to save Parker Schenecker. There's no such motive discussed there. Her anger is also demonstrated when she talks to Officer Koplis immediately after they arrive. And she says, "You're going to call my husband? He's going to be so upset." That's my inflection. We don't know how her inflection was. But the fact that she's already thinking about how Parker Schenecker would be upset gives you an insight into her mind, that she's taking some type of horrible satisfaction at that. On February 18th of 2011, Parker Schenecker decides to go talk to Julie Schenecker face to face, because he felt he owed it to her to tell her face to face he was, in fact, after the murder of the children, asking for a divorce. And they talked. And the depth of the resentment, the depth of the bitterness, the anger, the sense of betrayal that this defendant still carried and was running through her head at the time of the offense is demonstrated with her words at that time. "I guess I stomped your heart flat." I suggest to you that is directly implies that she did this in part to have Parker Schenecker as an emotional target. Do you have Exhibit 94? Now, you know from the evidence, including the journal, that Bo's practice that night, soccer practice, was at 7 p.m. And that you know that this defendant shot and killed Bo Schenecker in the car on the way to practice before 7 p.m. and that by her own description she drove immediately back home, parked in the garage, and went into the house, went directly upstairs and shot Kayleigh Schenecker. This email is at 19:33 hours, 7:33, within minutes of that homicide. And I suggest you safe to infer before she started drinking, before she started doing the oxys and the lithium. And what did she write to him? Something that Parker said was unusual for her to respond. Parker had earlier acknowledged to her and many others, Kayleigh's, Bo Schenecker, E. Schenecker, N. Schenecker, B. Genevine, made it back from Q tonight, he wrote earlier. Remember, there's a 9.5 hour time difference. So if it was at 1:30, that would have been about 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on that Thursday, that Julie would have got it. She responds at 7:33 p.m. after the murders are committed. And what does she write to him? She writes to him, "Get home soon." We're waiting for him. I suggest to you, wrote that with pleasure. Wrote that knowing, wanting Parker to find the whore. Parker to be the one to find the whore. The massacre that she had committed. Hurry home. We're waiting for you. How do you know that she wanted Parker Schenecker to find this? Because of these sticky notes. State's Exhibit 4, please. They're found on the front door. The officers arrived shortly after 7:40. Remember, they got the call at 7:40 a.m. on the 28th. So it took them a few minutes to get to that door. And when they got to that door, the officers found these stickies there. Notes to friends and carpool, respectively. Went to New York City. Julie, be back Tuesday. Okay, that really doesn't have anything significant unless you look at the entire context of it. 6:40 or 6:45 a.m., Mr. Shaw is there at the carpool. And he says, the sun's not completely up, it's coming up, but he's there. You remember what he told you. It's been several days now. There's been several witnesses and a lot of testimony in between Mr. Shaw and today. But what he tells you in the evidence during his testimony, and remember, this guy doesn't have an axe to grind. He's a IT manager for 30 years at J.P. Chase Morgan. He's just involved in the carpool. He doesn't socialize with the Scheneckers. He drives the morning carpool. Kayleigh usually comes out right away. The van's usually in that driveway. Neither the van is in the driveway and Kayleigh doesn't come out. He waits a few minutes until he realizes they're going to run late. He walks up to the door and he rings the doorbell. And he says, I saw inside lights were on. And he said with absolute certainty, rock solid certainty, these notes were not on there at 6:40 a.m. Next one, States 3, please. Defense counsel suggests to you that States 3 shows how the door would have appeared at 6:40 a.m. Remember the testimony of Matt Evans. They didn't have the search warrant done until afternoon. They didn't start processing the scene until afternoon that day. The sun is going to be in a different position in the sky, even in January, at noon, than it is at 6:40. This picture, I suggest to you, does not accurately show how this door would have looked as you approached it at 6:40 a.m. in January. You can rely upon your common experience and your common knowledge when you evaluate the evidence. In January at 6:40 a.m., it's not as bright out like it's shown in the reflection from the windows. What do you conclude from that? Can you show the next exhibit, please? Excuse me. Let me hold on for a second. You know from the calendar 18B, the Parker Schenecker was gone from the 19th, and shown in lines, to the 31st. And that Parker Schenecker was to be back Tuesday the 1st, in which there is a handwritten note indicating Bo's in the van, on the way to practice. Felix is in her bed, trying to make her comfortable. Counsel suggests to you in her argument that that was written while she was on autopilot, suggesting that that act is like running to the store for this defendant or like running to the carpool for this defendant. This was done after the homicides. It's certainly not an act, not a subject that she has written about ever before. She makes a note on between Monday and Tuesday on January. Sorry about your parking space. Had to leave it for Bo, my darling precious child. These are for Parker Schenecker, so Parker can find everybody. States 29, please. This is what I suggest to you the scenario was when you piece it together with the evidence. What do you see here? You see the journal that she wrote on. The last journal entry is essentially, take us home, Lord. We're ready to go to heaven. You see the bottle of pills. You see her cell phone. You see the journal on the master bed. Next exhibit, please. States Exhibit 37, you see the beer bottle on the dresser next to the bed and pill bottles. We know that she was drinking, and we know by her own admission she was taking pills after the homicide. When you look at the physical evidence and the photographs in the lanai where she was found, you can look real hard. You won't find any beer bottles. You won't find any prescription pills. Next photograph, please. States Exhibit 34, the bed next to the dresser, and States Exhibit 35, please. Next one. Thank you. The dresser where the gun box was. This is the dresser where Officer Noble said he found the gun. You've got the journal that she had her last writing on. You got the pills she was taking. You got the beer bottle, and you got where she left the gun. You know what happened, ladies and gentlemen? It's reasonable for you to infer. She didn't pass out initially on that lanai. She did not. She passed out in that bed where she had last written that journal, and then it was Mr. Shaw's ringing of the doorbell that awakened her. At that point, she realizes, I've got to place these sticky notes out there. The sticky notes that Mr. Shaw insists were not there. Then she goes out. Could you put 4 on those sticky notes? Then she goes out and puts these sticky notes out there. What's that tell you? It tells you about her clarity of thought even then. Even after taking the pills, she was determined. Depressed, absolutely. Mentally ill, absolutely. But angry and determined that those bodies not be found until Parker Schenecker gets back home. And what else is telling about that? They weren't just slapped up there in haste. As Parker Schenecker testified and demonstrated, this tape on the top of each of these stickers is attached to that door shows you she was bound and determined that they were going to stay on that door until Tuesday. She wasn't counting on just that adhesive on the back of the little sticker. She was going to put packing tape on those sticky notes because she didn't want those to fall off. She wanted them to remain. She wanted them to remain because she wanted Parker Schenecker to find the horror, the massacre that she committed. That's anger. That's resentment. That's a sense of emotional betrayal that she felt. That's the motive here. It's fueled by mental illness, absolutely, by depression, absolutely, and by her historic use of alcohol and drugs. But that's the reason she did this. She had the capacity, as this demonstrates, that scenario demonstrates her reaction to being wakened and going out there to make sure these sticky notes are there. She had the capacity to reflect and to reason and to do goal-oriented conduct and behavior even after the murders. To continue with the plan started with the taking of life. Started actually with the purchase of the gun. There's been a lot of testimony about the gun purchase, and I'm going to talk to you about the gun purchase. And why is that important? Because if you remember, among other things Dr. Mayer testified about was that she was in this psychotic state for the better part of a week or more leading up to it, including the purchase of the gun. But this defendant took specific steps to conceal her purchase of the gun, which suggests rational thought and a capacity to reason, not a psychotic state. This defendant drove all the way across Hillsborough County, 27 miles to buy that gun. The defense suggests to you that that's evidence of psychotic thinking, that that's just unreasonable, illogical. Of course, I suggest just the opposite. This defendant did not want to run the risk of running into somebody or being seen by somebody that she knew from Tampa Palms or from soccer or from King or from Benito Middle School buying a gun. She took no chances. And if you remember the 3 or 4 different reasons that she gave to various psychiatrists or psychologists for having gone there. She went to a pawn shop and she was directed there. There wasn't, somebody told her there wasn't a 3-day wait. That's another explanation. She said that it was just convenient, it was a matter of convenience, all these different explanations. The fact of the matter is she drove that 27 miles to a different county so that it wouldn't be known by anybody that she would run into. And what else? And why is it important that she conceals this? How does that fit into whether she's psychotic or not? You don't conceal something. You don't hide the purchase of a gun unless you're going to knowingly use it for a purpose that is wrong. If you fully believe what you're going to do is right, then you walk into that store and you buy the gun and you go about your business. Because she was allowed, she was entitled as a United States citizen to buy that gun. But concealing that purchase shows you her state of mind, shows you her appreciation for the wrongfulness of it. And when she tells the clerk that she's getting it for safety for home invasions, she's doing that because she understands that the clerk, if she told him the true reasons, is not going to sell that gun to her. She understands that even though she thinks what she's about to do is wrong, a member of society will understand and know that that's wrong and not sell the gun. And also on this point, remember, at the interview that Dr. Solomon on January 29th conducts at Tampa General Hospital with this defendant in the hospital bed, the question is asked of this defendant, did you tell Dr. Obregon about your plan to kill yourself and your kids? And she says, no, I didn't tell a soul. They would have found a way to thwart it. Again, indicating her understanding at the time of the gun purchase, with her intent to buy the gun to kill herself and the kids, she knew that society would view it as wrong. Now, she admitted to both Dr. Michael Mayer on his first interview with her on January 21st, 2011, or 23, 24 days after the homicide, she admitted to him in the first interview, I went there with the knowledge I was buying that gun to kill the kids and the children. Now that changed, as Dr. Mayer said, into later on in the interview, she said, I really don't remember the purchase. I knew I was going to commit suicide, but later on, I don't think I realized I was going to kill the kids until sometime in that week. But her first statement to Dr. Mayer, her first statement is, I suggest, the more credible one. And it's corroborated by what she told Dr. Salomon 2 days later, when Dr. Salomon went and interviewed her on the 23rd of January of 2011. And this defendant told her the same thing. At the time she was going to get the gun, she went to get the gun, her intent was to kill herself and the kids. So with that state of mind, knowing that that's what she's going to do, knowing to take these steps to conceal it, demonstrates she knew that society would view her conduct as wrong. This is at a time when, according to Dr. Mayer, she's psychotic. Now, she does pay with a credit card in her name and her name alone, a MasterCard, USAA Savings Bank. $19B, please. Now I know you can't see this well, but it asked me to take a look at it in deliberations. And the reason I'm showing you this rather than the actual white receipt is because if you remember when it was shown during Francine Technician Evans, it had already darkened by application of the powder. But when you look at it back in the jury room, you can see that it's Nancy Schenecker and it's a MasterCard, and it's this account. What's important about that she used this account, and the transaction is documented in one of these records. What's important about this? Parker Schenecker indicated that they had several joint credit cards accounts and that he did monitor the use online. Now, is that so unreasonable? Absolutely not. Not when you have the history with your wife where, unbeknownst to you, she's been gambling away a lot of money, but it caused some financial concerns a year or two before. Parker's keeping a watch on the finances, and Julie knows it. She knows it. So she knows that the only way she can buy this without Parker knowing about it is to use her credit card. Defense counsel suggests to you, well, he couldn't have done anything about it all the way over in Afghanistan. That may have been true 20 years ago, I suggest to you. But in 2011, you can check online anywhere in the world and learn this transaction. 2011, you can get any means of communication to call any number of people to check on why my wife is buying a gun when I know that she's got bipolar and depression and she has talked about suicide. It is significant that she has used this. Not because Parker was half a world away and he couldn't have got on his horse and prevented her himself, but in this day of instant communications, if he had learned about this, I suggest to you, it was reasonable for her to believe that he would have acted on it, knowing her situation. She concealed the transaction from Parker by using this credit card. You can look at her conduct at the time of the killings. And I suggest to you that circumstantial evidence from which you can infer that she had the capacity to reason and reflect in reality and was not driven by psychotic thought. And how do you know that? Because she realized by the manner she committed these murders, she couldn't kill these kids together. She wouldn't be able to carry it off. She had to separate them in time and in distance from one another. So she decided to take Bo in the car at a place and at a time where kids couldn't find out and wouldn't hear the shot, and then come back and kill Calix when she wouldn't suspect or know anything about Bo. And there was no reason for Calix to have thought anything was unusual when her mother came up to the loft, if she knew about it. This defendant was able to walk up close enough to put 2 gunshots directly into her head without Calix ever raising her hand in defense. What does that tell you? It tells you that she had the opportunity, the clarity of thought to commit this act precisely. 4 out of 5 shots hit the target with precision and did exactly what she intended, to kill the kids. She's not shaking when she's firing that weapon. There's no tardive dyskinesia or lithium toxicity on board. But part of the defense and part of the experts tell you that she killed the kids because she wanted to save them from a variety of prospects of being bipolar or suffering embarrassment or sexual molestation, protecting them from that. That doesn't jive with this defendant's written statements. 33L. Remember, the defense is she was going to kill both kids and take both kids to heaven so that both kids don't suffer the embarrassment, both kids don't suffer from sexual molestation and other evils of the world. But what's she right? States Exhibit 33L, another page, at the bottom of the page. Bo has become sassy since you left, copying Calix's attitude. Though it kills me, now that he's turned on me, he has to come along with us. That indicates, I suggest to you, that she had thought about killing Calix and had wanted and intended to kill Calix for reasons unrelated to saving her, because she was going to let Bo live until he became sassy. And only then, after he became sassy, did he have to go with us. Because only then, when he became sassy, did he need to be saved. That's not consistent with what they suggest is a psychotic motive. Not at all. Again, when you consider the evidence in the testimony, consider whether you've heard any evidence that she was suffering a psychotic episode at the time of the killings. And I suggest you'll find none. What evidence do you have that she knew what she was doing? Well, there's all kinds of evidence that she knew that what she was doing was going to be a killing. The phrase Saturday massacre, common usage, means, I suggest to you, the killing of many people, vulnerable people. 52B, please. The DNR note where she says, "Donate my body to science," indicates she knew that when she fired the gun at herself, it was going to be a lethal act. You don't donate your body to science, obviously, until you're dead. The journal entries, they talk about cremation, cremate us, course, that doesn't happen until you're dead. That indicates an awareness and understanding of the lethality of shooting the guns. She told Bo, when she raised the gun and he got concerned, that she told him it was a toy gun. And of course, why would she tell him that? But to alleviate his concerns so she could accomplish her action, because she knew Bo didn't want to die. And of course, she wrote afterwards that she had offed Bo. What evidence do you have, in addition to what I've discussed already about the wrongfulness, that she knew the wrongfulness of the act? Of course, we've talked at length about the concealment of the purchase, the use of the word evil, that evil would start on Thursday. She also indicated in the interviews that this was the worst thing she'd ever done in her life. She told Solomon that she wouldn't tell anybody about it, a soul, as I've talked to you before about it, because she knew that they would thwart the plan. And that, as Dr. Stein indicated in the evidence, there's her statement that she could have held back, or would have held back, if Parker was home. In 33M, as we've already published it, she apologized to Parker. I'm sorry, Parker. I'm sorry, Parker. I sensed that divorce was inevitable. I can't live alone. Apologies are extended only to alleviate or to acknowledge wrongfulness. She knew, Parker, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. Since divorce was inevitable. (33I), another page from Sunday. She says, now remember, psychotic thinking is thinking that is detached from reality. You believe, you're a true believer in your false beliefs. I just reread these last few pages. They're incomprehensible. I am losing my mind. That shows an ability to reflect. That shows an understanding of the ideas going through her mind. At that time, she's battling, I suggest to you, with her plan. A psychotic person doesn't think they're losing their mind. A psychotic person thinks, I'm the one who knows the truth. Anybody else that doesn't feel like me is wrong and unreal and deluded. A psychotic person doesn't question their own sanity. And then there's several people that saw her that noted at the time of the offense there was nothing unusual about her conduct. You can go to the gun sellers on the day she bought the gun and the day that she picked up the gun. Now there is testimony before you that psychosis is not always going to be readily evident or apparent to the man on the street. That's in evidence. But you can give some consideration to the fact that she was able to hold extended conversations over 2 separate days with Mr. Monaco and Mr. Tanzo, and they didn't pick up on anything. Clarity of thought, clarity of expression, logical thought. And if you look at the purchase, the videos of her purchase, and if you do, look at them close, because what you're going to see is a woman who's purchasing a gun much as she would select jewelry. Let me look at this piece. Let me look at this one. Let me look at this gun with and without laser. And she chose the gun with the laser.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Can we approach?
Yes.
Remember, Dr. Mayer indicated that this defendant was in a psychotic state for all that period of time. Of course, as I indicated repeatedly, the focus is on the defendant's state of mind at the time of the offense. But when you're determining for your purpose the credibility of Dr. Mayer's opinion, you can look at all the evidence of the times that he thought she was psychotic to see if his opinion makes sense. Now, even on the day of the purchase, which was earlier that morning, if you look at the timestamp, it's 11-something. And understand, she went from there to the Hard Rock Casino, then to do the murders after she's driving Bo. Again, clarity of thought, clarity of expression. It was a normal sale. A normal sale, he testified to. There is no evidence, as Dr. Stein, Dr. Taylor, and Dr. Otto told you, that this defendant was psychotic at the time of the offense. What you heard in defense argument was a lot of evidence about historical times when she demonstrated psychotic symptoms, which Dr. Stein told you were transitory and brief, and sometime in the past, and indicated to you that doesn't necessarily mean that she was psychotic at the time. That's why she was diagnosed with bipolar with psychotic features, because she had those episodes. But it's not illustrative of what was going on in her mind at the time. I suggest to you, when you reflect upon the defense counsel's argument, you will not have heard one example of psychotic thought or psychotically directed action at the time of the offense. The idea that she was killing to save the kids from molestation. Remember Dr. Otto's testimony on this. And remember, Dr. Otto conceded a lot. He said, yeah, I can't rule out a lot of possibilities because my opinion is only expressed to the basis of reasonable psychological certainty. And by that very nature, I can't exclude every possibility, but he said it's not probable. But anyway, that's the doctor I'm referring to. And he said, well, wait, let's break that down. The act of killing is not a delusion. And the concern that your child may be molested is not unreasonable, especially given her unfortunate and tragic history as a child. That's not a delusion. The idea of killing to be concerned or to prevent or to save any child from bipolar, Dr. Otto again said that's not a false and fixed belief, because there is some biological component to bipolar, and there is some indication that if there's a relationship or relation that has bipolar, it can be passed in that concern. The act of killing is not a delusion, and that reason has that explanation or that statement has a basis in reason, as do all others. And I'm going to digress a bit because there was some suggestion that it was evidence of psychosis that she confessed. Is that logical in your point of view and in your common sense? From that, I would suggest to you the logical inference is that only the insane confess, or that you must be insane to confess. And you know from exposure to all types of sources through your common experience that that's not true. It's not only the insane that confess. When you're considering the expert testimony, consider it in its entirety and look at the doctors one by one. You'll have an instruction called Weighing the Evidence. Defense counsel read to you some of that, I think, if I recall right. One of those things that you're going to be instructed on in thrown into the mix, whether you believe a witness or not, is was the witness honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's questions? Keep that in mind when you go back and think about Dr. Wade Meyer's testimony. Was that honest and straightforward testimony? She was functioning well enough to pick up medications on January 19th, January 18th, January 21st, January 21st, and much earlier. She was functioning well enough, as demonstrated by a receipt filed from the car on January 14th, State's Exhibit number 73A, to pick up 3 shirts from a laundromat on Bears Avenue at 4:25 p.m. on January 14th in the name of Julie Schenecker. She was low functioning, but she wasn't tied to the bed by her depression. I suggest to you, you cannot commit a murder like this on autopilot. There is rational and goal-directed behavior. First, the defendant, taken from that wine cooler countertop with receipts inside. Receipts in Julie Schenecker's purse showing Publix purchase on January 21st of food and items, showing January 22nd, Vendage Chardonnay, showing on January 21st, 1 bottle of Vendage Merlot for $6.99. She saved $3, and the second bottle of Vendage Merlot for $6.99. A variety of other receipts and a variety of other evidence of an active life in here. It's all in evidence. It's all for your consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most primitive instincts of all mankind is the one that a mother has to protect and to nurture and to love their children. For thousands of years, our predecessors' actions were controlled by those natural instincts. At some point in our evolution, our development, either by God's hands or by natural evolution or by both, mankind developed an intellect, the ability to make decisions, the free will to make decisions contrary to our natural instincts. Sometimes good, sometimes evil. That free will, that decision making, that intellect that either God's hand or evolution or both imbued us with, allowed her to overcome the natural instincts to kill her child
children and to perform the evil acts, the horrible massacre that she predicted. I agree with defense counsel. This defendant did not choose to be bipolar. Nobody chooses to be bipolar. However, this defendant did choose to take acts that sabotaged her treatment and management of that condition. Her extreme drinking, when constantly advised not to, when constantly advised that it essentially wipes out the effects of the medication. It can make your depression worse. It can have a sedative effect so you don't drive. In the face of that, she chose to continue to drink. That heightened that depression, that despondency. I suggest to you that's what is distinctly different than her bipolar 15 years ago, is that bipolar 15 years ago, there's no evidence, was accompanied by the amount and the frequency of drinking alcohol that she was demonstrating in November, December, and January of this year. And what did she say in December when Nancy Schenecker was at the Schenecker home helping out? I'll get out of bed when that bitch leaves, indicating that she was capable of getting out of bed. And what did she tell Wade Myers? She told Wade Myers, yeah, I wanted Nancy Schenecker to leave so I could drink. I suggest to you that at that time it showed that she had the ability to get out of bed. I suggest to you that that shows you she had such a craving and desire to use alcohol that she would do so at the risk of her family and caring for her children. She also chose to sabotage her treatment by refusing the request or suggestion of voluntary hospitalization when she was in this downward slide, to refuse AA treatments, to refuse all kinds of offered help, to refuse to even admit she had an alcohol or drug problem. She killed her children because she felt abandoned, betrayed, angry, despondent, throwing these emotions, these incendiary emotions, upon an underlying pyre of depression, serious depression, no doubt about it. If I would have told you at any time today that she was not mentally ill, did not suffer from depression, you should not have heard or listened or believed a thing I said. But it was out of anger and betrayal, a sense of abandonment, that she committed these acts. She couldn't and wouldn't face the possibility of a life alone. So she decided to take the children with her and to leave Parker Schenecker in a life alone. On that day, there was no way that Parker Schenecker could ever fully protect his children from what I suggest to you are selfish, vindictive, homicidal, premeditated acts of this defendant. State's Exhibit 81, please. Today, in this court, with this evidence, this defendant still has the blood of Calix and Bo Schenecker on her hands, just as she did on January 28th of 2011, as shown in this photograph. This defendant is responsible for the murders of her two children.
She was legally sane at the time that she committed these acts. And I urge and I implore you, upon consideration of the law and the evidence, to return verdicts of guilty as charged as to each count of the indictment. Thank you.
Members of the jury, I'm going to send you out for, again, what will be a not more than 15-minute break. Let's move this, please.
Yes, sir.
Give you this comfort break before I bring you back and instruct you on the law. As I send you out, I'm going to remind you that means we're still in the course of trial. Once again, until I advise you otherwise, you're not to discuss this case among yourselves, not to discuss it with anyone else, not to allow anyone to discuss it with you in your presence, not to speak at all with the attorneys, witnesses, defendant about any subject, not to read or listen to any reports about the case from any source, not to do any research, gather information, communicate about this case, the people or places involved, or your jury service, to any means, including those electronic devices. We'll give you that comfort break, then we'll come back.
All right.